Good morning and welcome to our webinar on building high performance teams. Teamwork. Been hearing that word a lot lately, the importance of teamwork. It's always been important, but with the disruption to work as we knew it, especially for us here in Sydney at the moment, with everyone working from home, it's obviously an even bigger challenge to keep teams working together, especially as high performance teams. So I'd like to start off by defining what a high performance team is. And I'm going to take this definition from a book called The Wisdom of Teams, which, I must have read this 15 years ago. The subtitle is Creating the High Performance Organization. The book is by John Katzenbach and Douglas Smith, who at the time they were doing their research on high performance teams were senior consultants at McKinsey & Company in Dallas. And they studied hundreds of teams, and obviously from all ranges of performance. And they came up with a model where they described 5 types of teams. And the 2 that are most relevant to what we're talking about today are, first of all, a real team, which is a small group of people who are equally committed to a common purpose, goals, and working approach for which they hold themselves mutually accountable. All right. So the term alignment is something we're going to spend a fair bit of time discussing today, because you can see that just to have a real team that's actually working together interdependently to achieve results, they have to have a common purpose, the common goals, common working approach. And I would say that working approach would also equate with values, the way we do things around here. All right. And then they hold themselves mutually accountable for that. He then went on to say that a high performance team has all the characteristics of a real team and has team members who are deeply committed to one another's personal growth and success. Okay, they care about each other. All right, and that would indicate that there's a high level of trust in a team. And I think you would know from your own experience that any time you've worked on a team where trust was not where it needed to be, it's very difficult to have the conversations you need to have, and especially to get into alignment to make sure everybody's sharing those common goals and that common purpose and sharing the values that we work by. When there isn't a high level of trust, we just can't have those conversations. Okay, so before we dive further into the subject of alignment, which we're going to, I just want to share something else with you about how important high performance teams are to your employees. All right, and I'm going to share with you a model that I've called the passion pyramid. All right, and this is based on some research that we've done across over 6,000 employees to identify what are the needs that actually ignite employee passion. And you can see the 5 needs in the middle of the model there, from 1 up to 5. And number 5 is to be on a winning team. All right, and in our survey there, we measure these needs. We ask employees 2 questions about each of 10 items. There are 2 items for each of the 5 needs. We ask them how important these needs are to you personally on a 10-point scale, and then how well does your organization satisfy this need. All right, and so when we ask employees how important it is to be on a winning team, the average score out of 10 is 9.2. In other words, it's extremely important for employees want to be on a winning team. All right, but the other thing that we've learned from our research, and I haven't gone into the model because it's a little complex to go through it in detail, but take a screenshot if you'd like to, or take a photograph of the screen. And if you want more information on this, by all means, let me know. But we can't actually have a winning team if the other needs are not being satisfied. See, people need to feel respected. They need to have the opportunity to learn and grow. They need to know that they're on the same team as the team leader. There's not an us and them kind of environment. And they need to know that what they're doing is making a difference, that it's meaningful. And then we can actually create a winning team because all of those needs are continually being satisfied. All right, and as you can see, there's some leadership skills needed on the left to satisfy the needs. And on the right-hand side, we have the outcomes for the organization when these needs are satisfied. All right, so The other thing that we've learned from our research is that there's actually a need for a high level of trust in teams. And that sort of shows up in the second part of this definition, doesn't it? All right. You're not going to have team members who deeply committed to one another's personal growth and success if there's not a high level of trust. And we're not going to have a high level of alignment unless there's a high level of trust. So I think it's important to visit the Intégro trust model. I know some of you have already seen this, but bear with me because it is an important part of what we'll be talking about in terms of creating a high performance team. All right. So here in that inner circle, you have the 4 behaviors that build trust. All right. And this is from original research done by Dr. Ralph Colby, one of the founders of Intégro in Minneapolis in 1973. And I came across this in 1977 when I joined Intégro, and it's actually the reason I joined Intégro. And so, first of all, let's start with acceptance. Who you are is okay with me, being non-judgmental. I'm sure you can think of people you've worked with that you wouldn't trust at all because they were so critical, so judgmental of you or others around you. And it's pretty hard to trust someone who's always finding fault. All right, so acceptance is the opposite of that. It's accepting people for who they are. All right, and that sort of creates a climate where the other behaviors that build trust can flourish. Openness, there's a lot of talk about transparency in organizations these days. Openness needs to be two-way. I give and ask for feedback. I give information, I ask for information. I share my opinions, I want your opinion. It needs to be two-way for it to be truly open. And of course, if we've got judgment, we restrict openness. So, and we need to have both, of course, to build trust. Congruence, not a commonly used word. And so I always introduce this by talking about congruent triangles. Congruent triangles have the same angles. They're the same shape. One could be bigger than the other, but they're congruent because the angles are the same. All right. So what it means is the same as. What I say is the same as what I really mean. In other words, I tell the truth. What I do is the same as what I said I should do. That is, I practice what I preach. Okay, so that's congruence. And you know that if you've worked in an organization or with people who said one thing but did another, not from a reliability perspective, but from a principle perspective. All right, that we've got these values on a plaque on the wall, but nobody's operating by those. All right, that's incongruent. And that obviously leads to mistrust. Okay, and the fourth and most obvious behavior is reliability. I do what I say I'll do. Okay, you can count on me. And it is the most obvious one in the work world. We are all judged by our ability to deliver what we're supposed to deliver. Can the organization rely on me? Can my clients rely on me to do what I said I would do and deliver something of value? Okay, but if acceptance isn't there, then we get less openness, and when we get less openness, we get less congruence, and that all affects reliability in the long run. Okay, and so in it was 2007, I made a decision to add another layer to this. And the reason is we always align this with the DISC model, right? And if you think about, I know most of you are familiar with this, that if you think about the different DISC styles, you can see that the different styles would have different strengths and challenges in using these behaviors, all right? Like the I style is very, very open. And sometimes we wish they wouldn't be so open with their personal stuff, right? But the C style struggles with openness, and particularly sharing and volunteering information, okay? The D style is really good at straightforwardness, saying what they mean and meaning what they say, right? It's a straightforward part of congruence. But the S style struggles with that because they don't want to hurt people's feelings. But the S style is really good at acceptance, accepting people for who they are. They're non-judgmental. And the D struggles with that because if you accept things, then you can't make any progress. All right? We want to keep on improving. And so, and of course, the C style is very strong in reliability, right? They don't say they'll do something unless they're absolutely sure they can do it and do it right. And the I style struggles with that because of their tendency to overcommit themselves. Their enthusiasm, optimism, and energy has them running away on a tangent sometimes. Okay, so so what happens if I, as an SI style, struggle with straightforwardness, and therefore I am not straightforward, especially with someone who's a D style? I diminish trust. So I need to learn to stretch myself and push myself through the fear so that I can actually be more straightforward with people. The D style needs to be more accepting of people, all right? Less judgmental. Right? How do you do that? Well, you've got to consciously think about it. And if you're familiar with our iceberg model, we've got to look at the values level to look for the behavior, what we need to do to be more effective at using the trust building behaviors that we're not so good at naturally. Okay, and so I expanded the model to add the values that build trust. Okay, for each of 2 values for each of the 4 behaviors. So the values for acceptance are respect and recognition. So if that D style person is going to be non-judgmental and accepting of someone who's maybe not doing things as quickly as they would like them to, or not being as direct as they would like them to be, they've got to identify what they respect about the person and what they appreciate about what they're doing. So when you let them know that you respect them and you appreciate them, you are being accepting. But for the D style to be accepting, it would help them to be better at it if they focused on the values, right? And believe it's important to do that. All right. For the C style person to be more open, they need to focus particularly on disclosure. They get uncomfortable with disclosing information because they want to be sure it's 100% right before they do, because of their need for correctness. All right. And so they've got to believe it's important to share information in order to volunteer information, but they also need to be receptive. And we all need to be both receptive to what other people have to say, as well as being willing to disclose what I have to say. Okay. When we believe they're important, we're going to be more open. In terms of congruence, we have straightforwardness and honesty as the 2 values that drive that. And as I've already given as an example for myself, the need to be straightforward is difficult for the S style because of their need for acceptance and their fear of disappointing others, right? And so if I'm going to be more straightforward, more congruent, I need to believe it's important to be straight and speak up and say something that I know may not be popular, but it's got to be said, okay? Honesty doesn't fit with DISC at all. It's nothing to do with DISC, because you can have any style who's very honest and any style who's very dishonest. Okay, so I always refer to straightforwardness when I'm lining up the 4 behaviors that build trust with the DISC styles. Okay, and then the 2 values for reliability are keeping commitments and seeking excellence. All right, keeping commitments is the obvious one. Do I do what I say I'll do? Right, and I mentioned earlier that the I style sometimes struggles with that, and their strengths of enthusiasm, optimism, and energy result in them saying, yes, I'll do that, I can help you with that, without actually thinking through. So the I style, to be more reliable and keep their commitments, needs to see their commitments as a bit more precious, right? Don't make commitments unless I'm absolutely sure I can do it, and then commit to following through and doing it. Okay, seeking excellence is doing your best every time. And you know, the people you can rely on the most are those who always do their best. They don't give you half a job. Okay, so that's the Intégro trust model. And I'll be coming back to how do we measure a team's performance in terms of being in alignment and trust. And we'll come back to this model when we get to that. Okay. The other thing I want to share with you that came out of our research is that there is a chain reaction, right? Those needs that ignite passion. Let me just quickly revisit that. Okay. The 5 needs. And as I mentioned, we ask there are 2 items for each of the 5 needs that we ask employees. And there are 2 questions for each. How important is it to you personally, and how well is it being satisfied? Okay. The more those needs are satisfied, the higher the trust level. All right. And we're measuring trust in the organization as well. Okay. So when there's a high level of need satisfaction, there's a high trust level. There's a very strong correlation between the 2. We've never had a workplace where the needs are not being satisfied and there's a high level of trust. All right. We've never had a situation where the needs are being satisfied and there's a low level of trust. okay? Which makes sense. If your organization satisfies your needs, you're likely to trust the organization, aren't you, your managers, okay? The other thing that comes out of the research is that we have a higher level of passion. When there's high need satisfaction and high trust, we have high levels of passion. And we don't just measure passion for the job. It's also the passion for the organization. How emotionally connected to the organization are they? In other words, people whose needs are satisfied and have a high level of trust for the boss love coming to work, right? They're passionate about it and about the organization they work for. And of course, that leads to very high levels of engagement. Okay, so let's come back to the subject of alignment. And this little question here is how much training and guidance have had in the practice of getting alignment. It comes out of some research by Wiley. You can see down the bottom there, adapted from the work of leaders by Wiley, which is a book about the work of leaders profile. And in 5 years of research, when they were developing that profile, they came up with what they termed the work of a leader. The work of a leader is to craft a vision, build alignment for that vision, and then execute a plan to achieve the vision. All right. And what was interesting, that this area that the leaders of the teams that they were talking to struggled with the most was alignment. And so they asked them, how much training or guidance have you had in getting alignment within your team? Choices were none or almost none through to a great deal. I'm sure you'll not be surprised to find that 65% of them had none or almost none or a little bit of training or guidance in alignment. And I think that's probably got a lot to do with why we have so few high performance teams in organizations. I'm generalizing there, but I know that just with many organizations that I've worked with, there's not a lot of teams that you would actually say they're really high performing. I'd like to think I'm wrong on that, but we'll see. So what do teams need to be in alignment on? That's a key factor. All right, well, this is something that I came across when I first joined Intégro, really, was how do you get alignment in your team? In fact, in 1980, we released the first version of our team alignment assessment. And so these are the 6 critical factors that teams need to be in alignment on. Right? And the first is purpose. Why do we exist as a team? All right? Why was this team created? And the team's always created to deliver some value to the organization. The team is there to deliver something. Someone else in the organization needs what they do, or the output of what they do, okay? And is the team clear on that? Secondly, values. What are the standards that we operate by? How do we treat each other, okay? And the third one is vision, and which is, where are we going? What do we want to be doing and achieving at a particular point in time in the future, all right? Now, I always refer to Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, when talking about this, because his very famous quote of to create a visionary organization, as he called them, you've got to have the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and the right people in the right seats, and then figure out where to drive it. See, the vision is where you're driving it. So you've got to have the other stuff first, which is the bus. What's the bus created for? All right. Are we clear on what bus we're on? And then who are the people on the bus? So we've got right people with the right values. And he talks about that in his book, that it's not about the skills necessarily of the people on the bus. It's the right people with the right values. And yes, obviously, we've got to put them in the right seats with the right skills. Okay. And then we can figure out where to drive it. Okay. And I think a lot of teams don't talk much about purpose, values, and vision. And I'll come back to that point in a moment. Once we've got a vision, we can then determine the goals, obviously. What are we trying to achieve this year? What are our priorities? What's important to us right now if we're going to achieve our goals? And roles. Who's responsible for doing what? All right. And that's pretty standard stuff. I've got one more piece of this, and that is the communication. And we don't actually measure the communication because the whole assessment is measuring how well the team is communicating about its purpose, values, vision, goals, priorities, and roles. All right, the less communication there is, the less clarity there is around all of those things. Okay, now I'm going to refer to Patrick Lencioni a couple of times in this webinar, and the first time is now, and about his book, The Advantage. And I'm mentioning this because The Advantage is his only book that's not a fable. It's a business book, and it's about creating a healthy organization. And as you can see on the bottom of the cover there, why organizational health trumps everything else in business. And he says in that book that to create that healthy culture, everyone in the organization needs to be aligned around 6 questions. All right. And the 6 questions are: why do we exist, which is purpose? How do we behave around here? What are our values? What do we do, which is not exactly the same as vision, but vision is more what are we going to be doing as a business at a particular point in time in the future? How will we succeed? What are our goals? What's most important right now? What are our priorities? And who must do what? Our roles. What's my role? Okay, so I'm just sharing this because Intégro came up with those 6 factors in 1980, a long time before Patrick Lencioni was even in business, let alone wrote his book. But his research is sort of supporting what we found, that these are the 6 factors that are most important for teams to be in alignment on. Okay, and there's 2 parts to alignment, right? There's clarity and approval. First of all, everyone must be clear about what our purpose is, what our values are, what our vision is, etc. Okay, but we also must approve of it, because if we're not clear, we can't be in alignment. And if we don't approve of it, we're not in alignment. That is, I don't buy into it, as Patrick Lencioni would call it, right? How can I commit to things if I don't approve of it? And so even if I don't agree with a decision that the team makes, I need to commit to supporting the decision so that we're all on the same page. Okay, so coming back to Katzenbach and Smith, alignment's key, trust is key. All right, and so why high performance teams important? Okay, well, they significantly outperform all other like teams and outperform all reasonable expectations given their membership. I'm sure you've seen that with some sporting teams too, that you look at the players on the team and you say, how do they do that? Because they've got no real big stars in there, but their teamwork outperforms other like teams. Okay, so how do we measure trust? We've got an assessment called the Team Alignment Survey, and as the name implies, it measures alignment, and it measures the 6 factors that we talked about just before: purpose, values, vision, goals, priorities, and roles. And for each one, we're measuring whether the team is clear and whether they approve of those 6 factors. Okay, and so the shaded areas there represent the scores on a 6-point scale. And as you can see, there's a fair bit of variety in this team. And what sort of stands out is we're fairly clear on our purpose. We've got about a 5.3 there out of 6. But we're not so clear on our values. We're down at less than 4. Okay, so that's not uncommon to see variety in that, because especially in teams where there's not been the kind of conversations they need to have. There's also each individual on the team gets their own individual report. They're the only ones that get it. It's confidential, but they can see how they scored the team. And so here's an example of a member of that team. And typically this would be the team leader who sees things a little bit rosier than everyone else on the team, a little bit more clear, a little bit more approval, and themselves quite strongly approving, particularly on goals and values there by the looks of it. Okay, and so down the bottom it says the approval scores are personal approval. Do I personally approve? And the clarity scores are team clarity. The questions are worded in such a way that we're asking team members, how clear do you think the team is? Not how clear are you personally? Because if you ask someone if they're clear themselves, they're typically going to say, oh yeah, I'm clear. they don't want to admit that they don't understand something, right? But then if you ask them, how clear do you think the team is, we get a more accurate answer, I think, okay? And so we also can measure where the team sits compared to other teams. So we've got a measurement in place where we can say, is this team at level 1, 2, 3, or 4? Level 4 would be the highest level of alignment, all right? And they'd be among the top 25% of teams in terms of alignment. Okay, this particular team is at level 2. Okay, so they're in the 25 to 50% quartile. Okay, so the alignment report also has broken out so we can see more accurately what we can actually work out a percentage score. So that helps when we're doing this for a second time later on, and we can see how the percentages are shifting. Okay, and we also include in the report the actual what we call the frequency report, because it's what team members are being asked. What's actually not so much frequency, do they strongly disagree through to strongly agree on each of the items that we're using to measure these 6 factors. All right, so you can see there's 2 for clarity and 2 for approval for each of the 6 factors. Okay, and then of course we have the trust model, and we want to measure the trust level in the team as well. Okay, and one of the things I think is important is that people have very different views about trust. If you ask someone, what does trust mean to you? You're going to get a variety of different kinds of answers, and different disc styles are going to probably answer it differently as well. And in fact, I think different disc styles tend to place more importance on the trust building behavior that they're best at. All right. Like if you ask someone who's a strong I style, what makes it easy for you to trust people? Are people who are really open, because they're open. Okay, S's would be people who are very accepting, who are not judgmental. D's would be straight shooters, and of course the C style would be absolutely reliability is the most important thing. Okay, so that's why having a model like this is really valuable, where each person on the team can see that there's a range of behaviors that need to be present for us to build trust. Okay, and if I'm struggling with one of those behaviors, I can drop back to the values and say, what do I need to believe is important in order to be able to use this behavior more effectively? Okay, so the trust report in the assessment report shows how the team has scored the team on how well they're using or operating by these 8 values that build trust. You can see keeping commitments this team's doing really well at. And pretty good at seeking excellence. Not so good in the openness area, particularly on disclosure and receptivity. All right, and there's also an individual report here, of course. Okay, and we also measure what level of trust building ability this team is at. In this case, they're a level 2 as well. We just go back to that for a second. Okay, and typically the level of alignment is going to match the level of trust, which it does with this team. Okay, so if they want to get to level 4 alignment, they're going to need to increase the trust level to level 4 as well. Okay, and of course we can break that out so that we can see what the percentages are. Again, it's a 6-point scale, and then we have the frequency report, which is actually a frequency report now. We're almost never to almost always, and 2 items for each of the 8 values that build trust. Okay. Now I know that there's people on this webinar who are familiar with or use the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team, and so I just want to make a connection there. So if you're not familiar with the 5 behaviors, it's team assessment and intervention created by Wiley in conjunction with Patrick Lencioni, based on his book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. All right. And I'm including that because people often ask, well, should we look at the team alignment survey or should we look at the 5 behaviors? What's the difference? Well, the difference is that, first of all, there's nothing in 5 behaviors that measures alignment. right? And the other thing is that in 5 behaviors, when you're looking at trust, you're looking at vulnerability-based trust. Whereas in this particular assessment, the team alignment survey, we're measuring a much broader base of trust. And so there's an overlap. And if you ask me how would I see them going together, I actually use both with the same client. I just not long ago, a couple of months ago, been to Adelaide when we were allowed to work with a government department senior executive team down there, state government department. And I started with the team alignment survey. We had 7 out of 9 members of the team were in the D quadrant, and they weren't all that sure that they really needed to do anything like 5 behaviors. And so we did the team alignment survey first and then debriefed that. And then I went back a couple of weeks later and we did the 5 behaviors 2-day session. And what 5 behaviors is really good at is helping team members learn how to have the conversations they need to have to actually get into alignment. But the 5 behaviors program itself doesn't focus on what you need to be in alignment on. Okay, so I think that's the key difference. Okay, so here's an example, a case study, if you like. This is a CEO who got me into work with their executive team some time ago. And you can see there's very low levels of alignment here. But what was interesting was that the CEO was very unaware of that. All right, his scores, in some areas, yes, he was not far off from the team, but most areas he saw things as a lot clearer and there was much more approval. He was approving, but he came up with the purpose and the values and the vision and the goals. And of course, he's going to approve of them. Okay. And then 3 or 4 months later, I don't remember exactly how long, but it was about that time, after we spent quite a bit of work on getting more clarity and more approval and building trust. The team had significantly increased their alignment. And of course, the CEO still a little bit on the rosy colored glasses, but much closer now to what the team was seeing. So much more alignment between himself and the team as well. All right, the trust report from the CEO initially, you can see why there was such little alignment in the team because of the very low levels of disclosure and receptivity. There's not a lot of open communication going on. And probably because there wasn't a high level of respect and recognition going on either. Okay, very much more a task-oriented team. Well, again, we actually have to work on the trust first so that we can have the conversations we need to have to get the alignment. Okay, so I want to take that into some interesting information that's come out of the research that we've done with this tool and collecting data from many different teams. All right, and the first one is I said earlier that a lot of teams don't spend any time talking about, or very much, if any time, talking about purpose, values, and vision. All right, most team meetings is going to be about goals, priorities, and roles, which is what's going on today. Right, purpose, values, vision is more future focused. It's out there. What is our purpose that we aspire to? Now, yes, of course, it's today as well as out there, but it is aspirational, looking out there as to why we exist and what difference we make, what's the value we deliver, right? And what are our values? And again, we aspire to operate by these values, and our vision is definitely out there in the future, all right? But there's a strong correlation between these two, okay? That is, teams that have do talk about and spend time on their purpose, values, and vision and have very high levels of alignment around those 3 factors, have much higher levels of alignment around goals, priorities, and roles. So if you want your teams to really be committed to and passionate about their goals, priorities, and roles, let them see how it connects with why the team exists, what your values are, and what our vision is, and they'll be much more inspired. Okay. So that's I think a key finding that's come out of this. All right. The other thing is the connection between trust and alignment. All right. We've known since 1980 that there's a very strong correlation between trust and alignment. And and that if we want to increase alignment, we've got to increase trust as well. But when we gathered our last lot of data from the surveys that had been done, I wanted to see what the difference was between the really highly aligned teams and those who were not, and maybe be a little bit more specific. And then what we found was, and we did what called in stats terms a discriminant function analysis, to look at what do the highly aligned teams, the top 25%, do that other teams don't do. And then actually what came out of that was that we could see that teams at different levels, from level 1, 2, 3 to 4, actually focus on different things. And so we've come up with this model, which I've called the evolution of high performance teams. Now, one of the things we found was that the value of respect, one of the values that drive acceptance, is foundational. It didn't show up as a strong predictor of performance, but when we took it out and redid the data, all of the other variables performed worse. All right, so it's foundational, and that makes sense. That if you're going to have a high-performing team, there needs to be a high level of respect within the team for each other. Okay, then we found that for teams who were at level 1 to get to level 2, instead of just saying build trust, they needed to be more specific and be more open, right? And the two values that drive openness are receptivity and disclosure. And that makes sense. If the team's at the lowest level of alignment, in the bottom 25%, they're not having open conversations. They're not listening to each other. They're not speaking up and saying, I don't agree with that, or I don't understand that. I need more clarity on that. And so when we assess a team and we identify that the team's actually at level 1, we can come up with specific action plans for them to increase receptivity and disclosure specifically, rather than say, you need to build more trust with each other. They are trust building behaviors, but they're more specific to the needs that they have based on their level of alignment. They also need to make commitments and keep them, right? Some commitments to action plans for continually increasing that receptivity and disclosure in their conversations with each other. All right. So if a team comes out at level 2 and they want to go to level 3, there's a different set of behaviors required. And interestingly enough, recognition comes in here. Right. Now, there are 2 items that we use to measure recognition. And it might take me a second just to pop back so I can show you that. All right. So here under recognition, praise is freely given in our team, and team members encourage each other, right? It's not recognition from the boss, right? It's from each other. That's key. So teams that do that really well, right, are going to be more aligned. Why? Because it builds team spirit. You know, if you're getting praise from your other teammates and they're encouraging you, it creates a whole different dynamic on the team. And of course, to get to higher levels of alignment, we need high levels of straightforwardness. We need people being willing to disagree and say, I don't approve of that. I don't like that. That doesn't motivate me. I don't think that's very inspirational vision statement, or something like that. It just needs a higher level of straightforwardness for team members to get from level 2 to level 3. And then when we look at level 4, the highest level of alignment, the top 25% of teams, all right, recognition becomes even more important. I didn't include this screenshot from our research report with the actual correlation data, but the degree of recognition that team members in level 4 give each other is considerable. And basically what the research would tell us, that if you don't give each other recognition, that is, if you don't give each other praise and encourage each other, you're not going to get to level 4 alignment. Okay, it's a necessary part of the team and the way they operate. And of course, seeking excellence, doing their best and continually working on improving their skills is also a key factor for becoming a level 4 aligned team. Okay, so that's the evolution of a high-performing team. And when I came up with this in studying the last round of psychometric data, it reminded me of the Tuckman model, right? And I think you probably most of you would be familiar with the Tuckman model of forming, storming, norming, and performing. Okay, and so, excuse me, when you're forming a team, a new team, it would make sense that right from the outset you would start working on building that mutual respect for each other in the team. All right, and that when the team is starting to storm or have disagreements, that's when we really need to be willing to listen to each other and disclose our opinions, make some commitments, stick to them. And we need that storming, that straightforwardness to get ourselves out of that storming phase into norming. And that's where recognition comes in. And obviously then again, to get to the performing level, higher levels of recognition and seeking excellence in everything we do. Okay. So that's the team alignment survey and its application. We can get very specific with action plans for teams depending on what level of alignment they're at, by using the specific values that build trust that will help them get to the next level of alignment. Okay, so we're really linking the two together, the trust and the alignment piece. I'm going to be running a certification for the team alignment survey on Wednesday, the 15th of September. It's a 2-hour Zoom meeting, training program to certify people in using the team alignment survey. We have an online platform very similar to Epic. It's our own platform, it's not Wiley's, because these are our own assessments, but it functions very similarly to that. So you can actually operate in pretty much the same way and use this with teams that you're working with. And as I said, if you use 5 behaviors, it's not an either or. They go so well together. And I've had a situation where a team leader wanted to do 5 behaviors. And of course, in some ways, it's easier to get attention with 5 behaviors because people have read the book. And the team leader wanted to do it, but the team didn't want to do 5 behaviors. They didn't think they needed it. And so we actually used the team alignment survey as a diagnostic tool to say, let's have a look at the level of alignment and the level of trust. And it wasn't pretty, right? In fact, they were at level 1. And so it made sense that we need to do something. The team couldn't argue with the boss anymore and say, we don't need to do that. Okay. So, and 5 behaviors is a great tool for, as I said, developing the conversations that you need to have. We do have training with the team alignment survey. There's facilitator guide and development notes and workbooks and PowerPoints and all that kind of stuff where you can actually take the team through building trust and increasing alignment as well. But if you like 5 behaviors and you want to use that, they go well together. Okay. So thanks very much for attending today. Appreciate you being here. All right, first question. Interested to know what shifts you see happening with the increasing number of teams that are working remotely and asynchronously. We haven't seen, just anecdotal stuff. We haven't been getting too many teams doing the team alignment survey during this time. And I think now's probably a good time to start looking at it to see how has the current situation impacted on the teams. But we know just with our own team, you know, we've got a fantastic team here at Intégro, and I know that we get lots of great feedback from our clients about how good our team is to deal with, and yet we struggle with the lack of contact that we're experiencing now. We're in week 8, I think it is, of working from home, and we communicate very regularly on Microsoft Teams and stuff like that, and have team meetings and all that kind of thing. But it's just not easy to keep things the same, is it? In relation to action plans, how long does it take time-wise for a team at level 1 to go to level 4? It's going to vary depending on the degree of time and effort they put into it. All right. I've worked with a team that just weren't really committed, and so when we did it the second time, there was really only a marginal improvement, like from level 1 to level 2, but they hadn't really committed to it. I would say you could get a team from level 1 to level 4 within 4 to 6 months if they worked at it, but they would need to be having regular meetings and at their team meetings, applying what they learned in terms of the action plans, and specifically the action plans related to the trust model. Like if we committed to being more open in terms of disclosing our thoughts and opinions, we've got to actively encourage people to disclose what they're thinking, right? And so especially for people who are not so vocal, to actually ask them, what's your opinion on this? What's your opinion on this? And so on, all right? And also monitoring and encouraging the receptivity side of that too. See, the thing with the team alignment survey is it's providing a measurement tool that tells you how the team's progressing, right? Are we progressing towards level 4? And since alignment is so closely tied to performance, you know, you're not going to get that high performance team without that high level of alignment. And to get that high level of alignment, you need that high level of trust. Okay. And so having a tool that you can actually show the client the progress the team's meeting is obviously going to be valuable in the client wanting to continue to work with you. Okay. Warren, the trust assessment is part of the team alignment survey. It's one assessment. There's 2 parts to it. So there are 40 questions, actually 42, because there's 2 open item questions. There's an open item question on alignment and there's an open item question on trust. But 40 questions measuring, 24 measuring alignment and 16 measuring trust. How often do you recommend alignment surveys be taken by businesses? Well, this is a team assessment. And so you'd be doing it by team. And that's because the questions are specific to a team. And team members can only really answer the questions about the team that they work with on a day-to-day basis. Not necessarily in the same room, of course, because we're now working remotely, but you're having conversations with, you've got the common goal, common purpose, common values, common vision. I know how other members of my team feel about those things by the conversations we're having. So if you try to do it, and we had someone recently pull together a report on about 8 teams that they had used a team alignment survey with, and all it gave us was a whole lot of averages, because it's averaged out across the whole thing, because people don't know how clear people are that they don't talk to regularly. All right. So it is designed for an intact team, and typically up to 12 people. So very similar to 5 behaviors in that regard. Well, thanks very much for joining me today. Really appreciate it. Sue will be sending out a recording so that you can pick up on anything that you missed, and also to those who registered and weren't able to attend. So if you have any further questions, just get in touch with me or Sue. We have an email address, trust@intégro.com.au, where you can contact directly with Sue about the Trust Inside assessments. And hopefully I'll see you on the certification training on the 15th of September. Thank you.